Okay, hi everyone. Today we're here with Jack Betts, who is a former football player at the Amherst College. He also has a lot of experience with NIL and is also in the progress of helping a ton of athletes figure out their own process in the NIL world. So today we're just going to ask him a few questions, but thanks for joining us today, Jack.
Of course, happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So first things first, I know you're from Texas and you traveled all the way up to Amherst College. So can you talk a little bit about your recruiting process and how you ended up there?
Absolutely, yeah. My journey from metropolitan Dallas, Texas, all the way up to rural Amherst, Massachusetts. It's an interesting one, that's for sure. I remember about my sophomore year of high school, I kind of sat down with my parents and I told them, look, I think I really want to pursue this college athletics thing. And football was really going to be my best option. So from then on, every single summer, I was up in the Northeast, whether it was Dartmouth, Princeton, Amherst, all these smaller, more academically oriented institutions, because the likelihood of me going to the NFL was slim to none. And so I really wanted to prioritize the academic and athletic balance. And when it came to my senior year, I was really down to two schools, Amherst and Dartmouth. And it just felt like Amherst was just much more welcoming. And I felt that I could really get the best of both worlds, both academically and athletically, given that Amherst is a Division III institution. It really was just the outright choice for me. And 4 years later, here I am standing here as a graduate. And I don't regret a single decision that I've made since then. So Amherst was definitely the way for me to go, even if it was 2,000 some miles away from home. It did turn out to be my home away from home.
Yeah, that's super cool. So in terms of your NIL progress, can you talk a little bit about how you started and like how you ended up to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my NIL journey, a little bit of a whirlwind, if you will. In 2021, when that legislation was first approved in July, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I was actually on family vacation in Colorado, getting away from Texas, out of the Texas heat, during the summer. And I was sitting down with my parents at the dinner table, and my phone just starts blowing up. NIL legislation approved. Athletes can now capitalize off their name, image, and likeness. And I was sitting there, what the heck does this even mean? And once I did a little bit more research, I kind of did some deep diving into what exactly this means for us current student athletes. I began texting my friends and my teammates and all of our group chats. And I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, like we have the chance to do something like really cool. Like we can make money off of just being collegiate athletes. And I sort of had to get a little reality check for them, from them. We are Division III athletes in the middle of Western Massachusetts. At the time, I had actually no career receptions because I was just coming off of my freshman year. And the likelihood of any of us getting a single NIL deal was slim to none. So I kind of sat from the sidelines, kind of watched that these millions of dollar deals flew by my face. And it wasn't until the spring of 2022, when I actually took a gap semester from Amherst. I was supposed to study abroad, but as a result of COVID, I actually wanted to come back for another semester of football. So I took a gap semester. I was sitting literally up here, which is our third floor space, and I got a DM from this company on Instagram, Lifestyle Bands. At the time, 1,500 followers, private Instagram account, not a huge poster, or sort of kept more to myself. And they reached out to me saying, would you be interested in joining our athlete marketing cohort for NIL? I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck do they want to do with me? At the time I finally got my first career reception. Hadn't done a lot on the field, hadn't done a lot off the field, and I have two lawyers as parents, so my legal counsel, quite fortunate to have them. And we said, what the heck? What's the worst that could happen? And from literally that was late January, early February. From then on, I just sort of pursued as many NIL opportunities as I possibly could, treated it as an entrepreneurial incubator to begin honing these entrepreneurial skills, these professional skills, as well as developing a professional network that could be really helpful 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And it ended up being extremely fruitful, and I'm really grateful for all that the journey has taught me.
Yeah, that's actually pretty crazy. Did you ever find out like why that first NIL deal was interested in you and like how they found you?
I still think it to be a little bit of an awkward question. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, but maybe eventually I'll sit down with them and
Yeah.
kind of be, look, you all have given me so much. How in the world did you even find me?
Right, right.
But no, just look back at it, and sometimes strange things tend to happen. Sometimes, and everything happens for a reason. So I'm extremely grateful for it. And had it not happened, we would likely not even be sitting down here today. So shout out
Yeah.
lifestyle.
So as a D3 athlete, and I know personally I was a D3 athlete as well, I know sort of trying to maneuver the NIL system, there's not a ton of resources for you, like not in a big Power Five school or anything like that. How did you sort of like teach yourself how to sort of maneuver the NIL system?
Well, I was really fortunate to have a pretty decent background in whether it be the operations of business. I've done a couple internships that have taught me the interior side of things. Nothing related to sports marketing, I can tell you that outright. But I have been able to take a couple skills, a couple things that I've learned here and there, and apply them to my NIL endeavors, as well as having two lawyers as parents. Pardon me, just sort of sitting in and listening to their everyday calls, how they go about their business, how their client relations really goes down. I think there are a couple things that I unconsciously picked up that I was able to apply to everything that I did NIL related. Like you said, we don't have these massive collectives that the Ohio States of the world, that the UCLAs of the world have, even the Alabamas of the world. How am I even forgetting them? And so I really had to take it upon myself and be my own, I guess, agent, be my own person that was like reaching out to these brands and being like, hey, Jack Betts would be a great asset to have on your team. So I had to take the approach of selling Jack Betts as the entrepreneur as opposed to Jack Betts as the athlete. You've got the Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, USC guy way out there in Southern California, millions of Instagram followers across every social media. I don't have that kind of platform. So positioning myself and being like, okay, this is why Jack Betts would be an important asset to your brand. Division 3 athlete. There are more Division 3 athletes in the world than there are Caleb Williams in the world. I can tell you that. So just kind of selling myself and being a good salesman was definitely the way that I was able to procure and curate the type of platform that I have in front of you right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. How did you sort of like, did you change your social media at all, or did you build your brand a little bit, or did you sort of just try and like stay, like keep what you had?
I definitely had to do a little bit of tailoring. At the time, 1,500 followers, private Instagram account, wasn't a lot of interaction within my social media followings, whether it be Twitter or TikTok as well. So there was a lot of learning that came with it. There was a lot of adjusting, but it's all about how you react to it, not about what happens necessarily. And I don't know, I had to do a lot of research. I had to sit down, do a lot of digging, look at other accounts for inspiration, see what my D1 counterparts are doing, what seems to be working for them. So there was a lot of research that went into it and a lot of hard work that went into it, into building a platform that is presentable, into building a platform that's attractive for potential partners. And so I can tell you it was a lot of work. It took a lot of polishing, but I finally found something that works, evidently. And
Mhm.
it was a lot of fun kind of seeing the process, seeing the evolution of what my social media used to be with, some more personal posts, whether I'm on family vacation or maybe, a end of season wrap up type thing, to now, being very active on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter and voicing my opinions on things that are going on in the world nowadays. And of course, on Instagram, I like to keep it casual now and then. But there are some posts that will be business oriented or some posts that'll be partnership oriented that my followers are well acquainted with at this point.
Yeah, well, it's obviously paid off. You now have your own sort of NIL academy of sorts. Can you talk a little bit about Make Your Own Academy and how that came about, or Make Your Own Legacy, sorry.
Of course, no problem. So the Make Your Own Legacy Academy is sort of a passion project that emerged in the summer of 2022. And thinking back on it, the main inspiration behind it was as I began to build my platform, as I began to garner a decent amount of attention and decent amount of publicity, I had more Division 3 athletes and more smaller market D2, D1, even some NAIA athletes reach out to me and be like, look, I'm coming from a similar situation as you, and I'm really interested in getting to the point that you're at. Would you be able to help me? And so thinking, as I mentioned earlier, not every school has the type of resources that these major Power Five programs have. And so there's more of us in the world than there are of them. And I kind of approached it like I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. So I began reaching, or all these athletes that began reaching out to me, I began having formal conversations with them, sort of sitting down and acting as a consultant, if you will. And that's how the Make Your Own Legacy Academy was launched. It was founded. We launched in the summer of 2022 with our inaugural class of 21 athletes. 21, obviously, an ode to the number I used to wear on the field during my playing days. And the academy is not only a really incredible educational opportunity, but I think it's also going to begin shifting into a great alumni network as well, as we have 60-ish athletes in total within the academy, but close to half of them are beginning to graduate and they're beginning to move on to their professional career once they move on from their playing career. And so within the academy, I educate these athletes on everything from, how to make your social media look presentable to that cold email approach, reaching out to these brands, negotiations, content creation. Under the umbrella is that we're probably not going to be playing our sport professionally. So it's important that we begin developing these professional skills, establishing this professional network that's going to be, really helpful for us 5, 10, 15 years down in the future. So if we can really hone in on these skills and establish ourselves as a professional during our playing days, who knows what it's going to look like, sometime down the line. And so that's just a little passion project that is the Make Your Own Legacy Academy.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I'm sure like tons of athletes are always interested, and it's sometimes can be pretty hard to find information out there. So not to like, I don't want to steal any of your brand ideas or anything, but what sort of tends to be the main questions that your new athletes have in terms of NIL? Like what do they tend to struggle with the most, or what tends to be like the biggest question they have?
So some of the biggest questions a lot of athletes that come to me have are, what type of brands even want to work with Division III athletes? And that's where I think the aspect of research really comes into play. As I began my career in NIL, it really came down to me. I'd love to reach out to every single brand. I'd love to reach out to the Nikes of the world, the Apples of the world, the Beats of the world. But the reality is these brands hadn't at the time dipped into, name, image, and likeness marketing. So instead, I had to look out at my fellow Division I counterparts, because at D3 level, there wasn't anything going on at the time, and sort of reaching out to these brands and being like, would you be interested in working with a Division III athlete? Would you want to take a chance on a Division III athlete? And a lot of these inquiries resulted in a good amount of progress. I became one of the first Division III athletes with a shoe deal. Shout out Allbirds. And just so being proactive is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have given to a lot of these athletes. They come to me sort of not necessarily asking for handouts is so violent, I feel like to say, but they kind of come to me instead and be like, hey, could you, I don't know, do this for me? And I want to empower them and give them the resources to go do it themselves, as opposed to, having me step in and help them. I don't really want to be an NIL agent of that sort. I'm not a huge fan of all that. I want them to be their own advocate. I want them to do it themselves. And so one of the biggest questions is, what brands even want to work with me? And so that's where I could be like, look, it doesn't matter what brands want to work with you. It's a matter of, what brands do you want to work with? Reach out to these brands. The worst thing they can say is no. Trust me, I've been told no thousands of times. And so it's one of those life lessons that you also learn from the business world, that you also learn from, being a collegiate athlete. And so that's probably one of the biggest inquiries that I get.
And so this is another question I had. You briefly mentioned it, but I did have a question about NIL agents. What do you think of them? Do you think they're worth it for athletes, especially Division III? Do you think that's a path that athletes should take, or do you think it's better to just go and try it on your own?
I've always said, and I've always been a huge advocator for the notion that NIL at the Division III level, NIL at the smaller market level is sort of done the right way. And what I mean by that is, we represent ourselves. We're the ones who, we're doing all the work. We're sort of getting all the experience, and we're really being thrown into the fire ourselves. Oftentimes it might not result in success, but I think gaining knowledge in itself is success. And so when you sit down and think about these NIL agents and what they bring to the table, I'm not entirely sure it's the type of thing that us Division III athletes, let alone any athlete, should want to really get into while they are still in college. I think it can be dangerous at times. I think sometimes they don't always have your best interest in mind. Um, But at the Division III level, I would say be your own advocate, represent yourself. You're going to gain a whole lot more from it than if you had somebody do it on your behalf. Because the reality is, the type of deals that we get at our level and with our platforms aren't even going to come close to those millions of dollars that the higher earning athletes are going to be getting. So whatever percentage of that an agent takes, it's going to be proportionally worse for us than it is for the athletes who are making those millions. So for Division III athletes, I'd say stay away from them unless like you're really major Hollywood big time. Just I'd stay away from them and be your own advocate and be your own representative.
Yeah, that sounds like good advice. Would you have you come across any NIL scams? And if so, how do you spot them?
I've been really fortunate to not have come across any NIL scams. I've heard some horror stories where athletes sort of don't read the fine print and they end up getting into an agreement that's like 4+ years. They're basically the entirety of their career as a student athlete. And I think that's another one of my biggest pieces of advice is make sure that you read everything before you put your, name on it. While I don't have any firsthand experience with any of these dangerous types of situations, I guess the best thing I can do is just give advice to ensure that you're keeping an eye out and you're making sure that whatever agreement you're signing isn't going to be that type of thing that carries out throughout your entire experience as a student athlete. You don't know where you're going to be in 2 years. You don't know where that brand's going to be in 2 years. So it's really important that you sort of protect yourself from anything that those brands could possibly get into, whatever trouble that they might get into. You don't want to have your name associated with any brand that could be really detrimental to your brand. So those are just a couple pieces of advice. Unfortunately, I don't have any firsthand experience, which is a good thing. But I wish I could give you more than just some advice. But
Yeah, I mean it's a good thing not to have, but
absolutely, are you kidding me?
yeah. I guess so in terms of social media, which seems to be the major way to come across NIL deals, what's the best way for athletes to make themselves like marketable?
Mm. So the thing I always tell my athletes is one of the major mistakes that a lot of these kids who are reaching out to brands make is they DM them on Instagram or they DM them on Twitter. They get thousands of DMs per day. Your thing is it's just going to get lost in the fold. That's the sad reality. Unless you have a verification badge or you somehow make it into their primary inbox, it's probably going to get lost in the fold and they're never going to get back to you. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give to my athletes is a way to set yourself apart from the masses is number one, email them. Number two, have a way within the body of the email that really sets you apart. And number three, accompany it with something within the email that gives these brands a really good breakdown and a quick elevator pitch about yourself. For example, the means by which I reached out to a lot of these brands. Number one, I emailed them. Number two, I had a little blurb within it saying, my name is Jack Betts. I'm a student athlete at Amherst College. I play football. I'm reaching out to you, inquiring as to whether you are active within the NIL realm, and whether or not an NIL partnership would be, possibly available between the two. I'd love to chat. And when I send that email, I attach what I call my NIL cover letter, which is just a means of these brands kind of seeing, okay, who exactly is this kid that's reaching out to me? I began approaching every single prospective NIL partnership as a job opportunity, like I'm applying for a job. And so these companies really need something in front of them that sells to them, okay, why in the world would I even want to work with this kid? And I've got my cover letter pulled up right here, Jack Betts, Amherst College, class of 2024E. Several sections within it include education, skills, work and volunteer experience, activities, awards and honors, and finally my current NIL highlights. So when you begin to set yourself apart and sort of I don't know, find ways in which you can remove yourself from the masses. That's one of the ways you can really find a lot of success, and allow yourself to stand apart from all these other thousands of inquiries that these brands are getting per day. So that's one of my biggest pieces of advice in that realm.
Yeah, it definitely does sound, it's very similar to jobs, but I feel like it also sort of sounds a lot like the recruiting process and making yourself like different from all the other athletes and trying to get coaches to notice you. So I
Absolutely.
think as an athlete, you already have sort of that practice with you. Um,
Mhm.
so where do you see NIL heading? Do you see it D3 athletes becoming more popular. What's your sort of vision for that?
I certainly hope so. During my time in NIL, and now that my time as a student athlete has come to a conclusion, I've seen the landscape really shift in favor of Division III athletes, and smaller market athletes. I'm seeing more smaller schools begin hiring compliance officers and begin hiring people who are solely dedicated in the athletic department to really helping their athletes maximize on the NIL opportunities. Once athletic departments have began seeing the type of benefits that result from these entrepreneurial incubator opportunities for these athletes, I think it's really been beneficial for them, and not only in the realm of helping their athletes once they move on from their sport, but also in the realm of recruiting. Given that there have been some horror stories, and I know we've got some things going on at the University of Miami, currently at Florida State as well, there are definitely some dangerous territories which you can begin stepping into and drifting into, but that's all at the Division I level. I'm hoping they don't ruin it for all of us. I'm sure that Charlie Baker has some things that are going to be set forth. The NCAA commissioner, he's got, or the president, whatever his title is, he's got some things that he's going to be wanting to set forth, that might begin to help NIL regulation, but there's always going to be loopholes. There's always going to be ways to find your way around it. So hopefully at the Division III level, it doesn't get ruined for all of us, because I've been seeing a lot of positive things trending in the direction for us. And I think it's just going to be nothing but positive, and we're really going to begin reaping the benefits as we conclude our career. I mean, right now I'm, having coffee with some people and trying to get into the sports marketing realm, all resulting from my time in NIL. So it's really, I have nothing but positive things to say about my experience in NIL, and I'm just hoping that whatever the future holds, it really helps us at the Division III level, because there's a lot of really, really cool people who come out of Division III schools and who come out of smaller markets. So we'll just have to see, though.
Yeah, cross our fingers. Okay, I think that's all of my questions. Do you have any like final thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's, listening to this, or anybody who's reading this, I'm not entirely sure if there's going to be a written component associated with it. But if you're interested in reaching out to me, having a conversation with me, feel free to visit my website, jack-betts.com. I've got an inquiry place in there, which you can send me an email. Also, my email is jrbetts, spelled BETTS 21 @gmail.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to sit down with you, and my Instagram as well as jbetts21. So yeah, again, thank you for interviewing me. This has been wonderful. I'm so grateful to continue to share my story and hopefully inspire that athlete who's picking between a Division I and a Division III school, and begin having them sort of sway towards Division III, because D3 is the way to go. I can tell you that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for meeting us. We're honored to always meet with the King of D3 NIL, and hopefully that title will be passed on to someone else. But yeah, thanks so much for meeting with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bella.